So this is seed saving for short season growing areas. And I will introduce myself. I'm Denise O'Reilly. I grow in a Zone 2B area in Alberta, which translates to about 90 to 120 days frost-free. So we started our journey in seed saving a while ago. We've been on the same land since 1910. So my daughter is 5th generation, and we grow organically. We are certified for the last 3 years, but up to that point, we were growing in the same way anyways. But now we have the certification. We focus on sustainability, and we use natural methods to enhance fertility in the areas that we grow. So we have cattle of our own. They get our own feed. The manure from the cattle goes back on the fields, and it's just a sustainable cycle. We don't bring anything in. If we can help it, I did mention that we are going to add some volcanic dust and glacial till this year, just to see if it makes any difference in the viability of our land. We use compost. We're small producers, so we only grow so many varieties a year. But we also put in a massive seed storage area, which keeps our seeds at a constant temperature, so we're able to maintain viability for a longer duration. And we produce garlic, potatoes, vegetables, of course, and my daughter's also doing a market garden this year with a CSA project, so that's something we're doing as well. We got into restoration agriculture a few years ago, the concept of tiering your land in a way that captures natural rainfall and allows you to grow things there that you couldn't ordinarily grow. So we're thinking about putting in maybe Alberta's only nut farm. We're not sure yet, but that's kind of where we're going in the future.
What type of nuts?
Probably, I think we could grow butternut, walnuts to start. I planted some oak, and probably Korean pine nuts. I'm thinking we can grow those there quite readily. So, farm history, my great-grandfather broke the land in about 1910. He grew commercial oats. So he was known as the Oat King at the Chicago World's Fair in 1963 and Toronto in the same year, 60, sorry. And he was pretty proud of his oats. He would sit at the table all winter long and just separate seeds and make sure that his sample of oats was just the perfect sample to send in. So we've continued with the tradition of growing food, growing cattle. We had a dairy business at one point, and we've expanded into the seed because of our philosophy that seeds belong to everyone. They should, come on in, they should be kept out of the hands of commercial people and into the hands of the people that use it for food. So. And my daughter, that's my daughter Yara, and at the fair, we used to do the fair quite a bit, so she is now the real grower. So why would you want to save seeds? There are some different reasons you might want to. Large quantities of produce, genetic diversity, you might want to protect it, or you might be facing certain diseases in your area and want to ensure that the plants that you're growing develop resistance to that disease. Biosecurity is a huge issue on farms these days, so a lot of people like to keep that within their own little circle, so the seeds you save would be secure from being contaminated by other outside sources. And if you're growing in short season areas like we are, the longer that you grow a variety over time, the shorter it becomes adapted to your shorter season. So seeds acclimatize themselves, plants acclimatize themselves over time. And that's important today, as we know, because the seasons fluctuate and vary quite a bit year to year, and seeds and plants can adapt to that. So they're pretty resilient when you grow them yourself. Maybe you have insatiable curiosity, like I do, and want to grow every cool-looking bean in the whole world. Or greater quality and taste is available through a lot of the heirloom varieties as well. So, or maybe you have lots of time on your hands and you don't know what else to do with it. So 95% of the commercial available varieties in the 1900s are now extinct. So it's important that we save the seeds that are still around, or in the case of squashes, they're doing different breeding projects with squashes where they take 2 squashes and purposely cross them to see what comes out of that, because they're recovering a lot of different varieties out of that mix, as we know. So that applies to livestock, and the climate's changing, everything. As I mentioned, shorter season, you can develop drought and frost tolerance, and the heirlooms naturally taste better. There's just some examples of some varieties that we've grown. And this is a petunia I like to call electric plum, because it's just really vibrant. That is a Rose de Berne tomato, some Georgescu chocolate peppers, which are really good, and some crazy squash. Patty pan, if you let them grow out, that's what they look like. So how do you begin? You want to find a seed source, so you can do that locally. Maybe some neighbors are saving certain types of vegetables, and you can do a trade back and forth. There's seed catalogs online. There's endless seed resources and events such as these where you can come and find lots of people that are doing the same thing that you like to do. There's just some more plants. This is 1,000-year-old tobacco, the year that we grew it. And those are Parisian pickling cucumbers, I believe. And just some more pictures. This is Tom Thumb popcorn. So the cobs only get about this big. The plants are only about 2 feet tall. And you get 2 or 3 little cobs on there, and it's a little tiny popcorn, but it pops, and it's easy to grow, and it's really fun. So. All right, so out of the starting gate, if you're going to save your own seeds, it's easy to start just with 1 bean, 1 pea, 1 tomato, that kind of thing. Some things are easily crossed with other things around them, and some things don't readily cross. Peas and beans are an example of things that don't readily cross with other things close to them. So you're easier to save your own seed from those, and it hold true to that variety that you planted. Tomatoes are pretty good, a little bit trickier. Peppers cross with other peppers, so you kind of want to stick with one kind, and then you know that the seeds that you have are only of that one kind. And corn readily crosses with any other corn within 2 miles. So that may not be one that you want to start out with if you're trying to keep your seeds pure. Come on in.
Okay.
Yeah, come on in.
Wait.
That's all right. If you're just playing around and you want to see what happens, like I was mentioning, in the case of 2 squashes crossing, and see what kind of really funky squashes you can get, it's completely fine to just let them do their natural thing. That's how nature works. But if you're saving seeds to pass them on to someone else, and you want to say this is this kind of tomato, then it's more important. So.
How far will squashes cross?
Squashes, they suggest about 500 meters, I believe, for squashes. Squashes are easy to hand pollinate and tie up the flowers and isolate the pollen from the varieties that you just want to do that way. That's how you keep your squashes pure. So this is a Cherokee Trail of Tears bean. It's a great pole bean. It's green, round, nice pods. Then it ripens, it gets that pinky color, and then ripens to dark brown. If you opened it at the pinky stage, it has lavender-colored beans, dark lavender, and they're really beautiful. And then if you let it ripen all the way, they're black. So you can't really tell that they're purple. It's just one of the fun ones you can grow. So the how-tos of saving your own seeds is record keeping is really important. You want to write down where you got the seeds from, date all the packages when you get them, make sure you know where you got them from. Do a little research online if it's not on the pack about how to grow that. You might have to start it inside. You want to record all of that information, and then when you started it, what the germination might be like. And as it grows throughout the season, you want to take some pictures, if that helps you, of what the fruits look like. And then the best way to save seed is to take the ripest fruit, the first one that ripens on the plant. So in the case of a tomato, the first vine-ripened fruit, that's the one you want to take the seeds from. Because then that plant adapts, and that's earlier and earlier and earlier, like I said.
So you just mark it until it's fully ripe, or you pick it when it's fully ripe?
Pick it when it's fully ripe. Yeah, and in the case of tomatoes, we'll talk a little bit more about how to do that. So those are Camp Joy tomatoes. They get to be about that big. There's lots on the plant. They're a good one. So that's some things about record keeping there. You might want to write down what the fruit tastes like, because maybe it's got a taste you don't like and you won't want to grow that one anymore. But you could pass the seeds on to someone else who may appreciate that. Okay? If there's any disease, anything like that, this is just an example of a seed register. There's plenty online that you can find that will help you with that. So growing is our next phase. Heritage seeds are generally seeds that are open pollinated and can cross-pollinate with themselves or with others. And they're generally stable from generation to generation. So the seed that you start out with grows plants. The fruit from that grows plants that look exactly the same generation after generation. Generally, the word heirloom and vintage are the same thing, kind of interchangeable. And heirlooms are generally considered seed that have been around for 50 years or more in the same form. So they weren't that easy to find years ago. Well, depending how far back you want to go, I guess everything was heirloom back then. But they were hard to find in about the 80s and early 90s, but it's been a resurgence in the interest in those varieties, so they are easier to find these days. So you should be able to find most anything that you're looking for. This is a ice plant. This is one of my favorites. It's beautiful. Yeah, and the leaves, as you can see, have tinges of pink on them, as well as these little spikes that looks like icicles. So that's a fun one. Okay, so if you're going to grow your own seed, you might need to isolate to protect genetic diversity and isolate that variety so that it doesn't cross-pollinate. You can do that in several different ways. People have different caging systems. If they have two different kinds of beans, they might put a cage on one day so the bees can pollinate these ones. And then they switch the cage over so that these ones can all be pollinated the next day. And that's perfectly fine. That's enough to set seed in those varieties. Yes?
What I've been doing, especially with ones that were in a higher elevation,
Yeah.
I've been picking, let's say, my bean seeds, the ones I want to keep,
Yeah.
and I put them in a bag, mark them, date, whatever. Usually I wait until the plant is pretty much died
Right.
before I pick them.
Yes.
What's left. And I then put them in a bag of some sort, put them in the freezer,
Exactly.
and I leave them there all winter.
Yeah.
And then about this time, I take them out, put them in the fridge,
Yes.
let them warm up.
Right.
And then another end of May, 1st of June, I can plant.
Yeah, that's a really good idea because seeds need to have a cooling period where they're kind of tricked into thinking winter has come and gone. So that's exactly what you're doing there. And also, that is the best storage for seeds, is frozen. It keeps the longest that way. So if you buy your seeds, you can also put them in Ziploc bags and close the Ziploc bag and store them in the freezer while you're not using them, like he was saying. And then when you're going to use them, you can either transition them to the fridge or you can actually put them out on the counter, but don't open the Ziploc until they're completely at room temperature, because you don't want to introduce extra moisture into the mix, and you will if you open a frozen bag. As you know, the moisture will just condense on what's frozen inside. So that's a trick that we can do there too. Excellent point. We'll talk a little bit about hand pollination if we have a chance. Harvesting, you might have to harvest some things once a week, like lettuce. Seeds will just fly away if you don't shake them out of the seed heads about every couple days. Some things you harvest every week, some things you harvest at the end of the season. So if you're going to save your own tomatoes, for instance, you probably only need to save one tomato if it's just for you, because there's probably between 25 and 120 seeds in there. So that's probably going to be enough for you. There's Georgescu chocolate. So I'll just tell you quickly how to take tomato seeds to save for yourself. And that would be a wet processing method. So like I said, you just harvest that ripe tomato, cut it in half, squeeze out the juice into a jar. Basically, the seeds will carry with the juice, and then you'll have a little, probably about that much in the bottom of a glass jar, and then just add water on the top and let it sit somewhere warm for 3 days. And every day you stir it a little bit, because what you're doing is breaking the gel coat on the outside of the tomato seeds. You want that to break off. So it ferments actually, and the good seeds will drop to the bottom of the container, and the bad seeds will stay floating on the top with all the rest of the yucky stuff. So you do that 3 days, and then you add more water, fresh water, let it sit a minute till the bottom seeds are just still, and then slowly pour off the water, add more clean water. Keep doing that process until the seeds are clean. And then just either take them out and put them in a sieve so that you get the last of the water out, or spread them on a plate at that point and put them somewhere warm again and let them dry for probably at least a week. And then they'll be nice and dry. Thank you. So these are some of the tools you might use. Make sure you're marking everything as you're going along, because you'll probably forget what it is if you don't. There's the fermentation I was talking about, where that little gel coat of yucky stuff is on the top there. And they're processing a bunch of tomatoes. You could, if you only had a few, you could probably kind of wash them and stir them around in a sieve until you kind of got them clean. But if the gel coat's on there and you put them on a plate to dry, they'll just stick. So you're trying to get away from that. There's a Mandan squash. Dry processing is for things like broccoli, and when you get, into the advanced stages of seed saving, and you want to try cabbage or broccoli or any of the beets, any of the carrots, yeah, those kinds of things. They'll make a seed pod just like a canola plant will, and it's easy enough to just take that off, let it dry completely, and the seeds will probably burst out of there. So I would suggest putting it in a paper bag and drying it, and then just kind of shake the bag or kind of squish it a little bit, and all the seeds will fall out of the little pods. You can do peas and beans that way, but you got to dry them really quickly. So if you're going to do corn, just pick the ripest cobs when they're past eating stage, maybe to the point where the husk on the outside is starting to dry. That's probably ripe enough to pick. Let it dry in the husk, but somewhere just keep an eye on it, because it might mildew if it's not hot enough. So you want to do that until the husks are completely dry. Take the husks off, dry it again until the cob is completely dry. And then you just wring it like this off the cob, and the seeds will fall right off. And then in the case of beans and things like that, peas, you can crush the pods, you can break them open. If you have a whole bunch, you might have to winnow like this to separate it out. You can germination test your seeds. It's always a good idea. And that's just a simple matter of taking 10 seeds and sprouting them and then taking a count of how many out of 10 actually sprouted. And you'll have your percentage.
Is keeping them in the freezer, how long are they viable for?
If you did tomato plants that way, you could probably do that for 15 or 20 years. Yeah.
So I keep all my seeds in there, but some of them are, like 3 years, 4 years.
It depends.
I have to test them.
Yeah, it depends what it is. Lettuce and parsnip, those kinds of things where the seeds are quite thin, they don't seem to have as much stored energy for the viability. So they're a bit less, for sure. Yeah. So yeah, it's always a good idea to do that. Yeah. I think I've mentioned about the regional adaptation of seeds. And that's my mother-in-law. She'd kill me if she saw that picture up there. We had a grow-up program, so there's just a little information about that. If people were interested in saving seeds in coordination with us, then they could have some seeds, grow them out, and we would just do a share at the end of the season. So that's what that's about. And that's it, I think. Any questions?
Do you have any pressure from big corporations to use their seed?
Not at this point.
Do you have any farmers that are using GMO that might grow onto your property?
We have one farmer that grows canola kitty corner a mile away every 4 years. And I don't grow canola, but if I'm doing my brassicas, I have those isolated in cages so that that's not a concern. Other than that, that's about it.
I just find I can hear the air vent blowing.
Oh. Okay, well that's not very good.
I just thought you might share some of the different types of seeds that you would grow in Alberta that are short season vegetable.
Short season vegetable. Well, we can grow corn in Alberta. You guys grow it better here, maybe. Maybe not. Maybe don't get the heat units. Short season. Anything listed as 85 days or less, we can grow.
Oh, okay.
Anything like some of my corns are 100 and 105 days, but I start them a month early in 6-packs so that when I set them out, they've got that little bit of a head start. And depending on the year, it may or may not happen. So dry beans are a bit of a trick if they're ready at the green stage at 70 days because they may not be dry in time. But what I do for my beans is if the majority of the plant is ripening, I'll pull the whole plant and I'll put it in a frost-free area and it dries on the plant and fills the pots. So we've done that before. Yes?
You talked about having to rinse the tomato seeds, but did you explain, like, do you have to ferment them or something?
So that when you squeeze the juice in and you add the water for the 3-day period, they're fermenting then. That's the fermenting process, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's it, yeah. You could probably just squeeze them in the garden if you were going to remember that that's where you did that, because they would sprout next year. But they might sprout this year, which would be a problem. And also, if you wait till the end of the season when you get a few cold nights and you try to take seed off the tomatoes, then that's enough for them to start sprouting in the water. So that's why you want to take the first of the season tomato. Yeah. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate you being here.